Okay, so according to the MSN, in April 2020, almost 1.8 million guns were sold, and that's a 71% increase from April 2019. And in March 2020, the increase of sold guns was even higher. It was around 85% from 2019 to 2020. Also, according to the US News, there is 47,000 new owners of guns, and it makes people very concerned in the US. And as a matter of fact, they have been dealing with gun issues for many years. And in 2018, 73 kids were killed in shooting accidents.
In 1791, the Second Amendment was ratified, and the Second Amendment is the right for people to bear and keep firearms. And an understanding of the turbulent history of gun control in the United States can sort of explain why Americans don't agree on gun control legislation. The origins of gun control began in around 1934, when the violence caused by Al Capone made the Congress pass legislation which required all guns to be recorded in National Registry. But although it was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963 and Martin Luther King in 1968, these were the events that triggered the Gun Control Act of 1968.
Okay, so the Gun Control Act of 1968 requires that all citizens must be at least 18 years old to purchase shotguns, rifles and ammunition. All other firearms you have to be 21 years old to buy, or of course older than that. And people who are a danger to society and people who have mental issues, and also people with prior felony convictions, all those are not allowed to bear any kind of firearms. And all laws regulating whether you have the right to bear arms or not are made by the federal government.
The parties and their leaders' perspective on the gun control. So both parties, the Democrats and Republicans, have different opinions about the policy. The Republicans' perspective on gun policy is that the individual should have their right to bear arms. So they mean it is a God-given right and a self-defense for a law-abiding citizen in the US. Here is a quote from Trump where he declared that I saved the Second Amendment. If I wasn't here, you wouldn't have a Second Amendment. And here Trump means that the Second Amendment should continue in US. The Democrats' goal is to strengthen the gun law in US, and the Democrats mean that you should have a license to own a gun, and the courts should be able to remove your right to bear arms if the gun is in danger for others or yourself. And here is a quote from Biden where he says, "We can and will end our gun violence epidemic." And here we see he's against gun violence and owning a gun in the US. So open carry is a term that means a person can openly carry a gun in the public. So the states in the US have different law on how you are allowed to bear arms. For example, in Alaska and Alabama, you can openly carry a gun. In Colorado and Iowa, you are allowed to openly carry a gun, but there are local restrictions in these states. In Hawaii and Connecticut, you need a license to openly carry a gun, and for example in California it is anomalous. In Florida and New York, it is not allowed to openly carry a gun.